right. So team, welcome to today's session, non-relational storage. I think Vivian and I are going to have a great time working with you on non-relational storage. I do have it's a different type of approach. It's like if you think about a conference, we are going to have some demonstrations, we're going to have some slides, some whiteboarding, and of course, Vivian is going to put some questions on the chat line. So as I am going to be delivering some content, Vivian is going to help with the chat line. Of course, Sarah is going to jump in as well with some questions, and this is going to be a very engaging session. So team, again, welcome to Learning Rooms. My name is Elias Estevam. I am one of the MTT, Microsoft Technical Trainers within Microsoft. I teach quite a few of those classes, particularly the 104 and 305, 204, and IAI, and of course, SAP, and also lots of classes, right? We're always busy. But I've been with Microsoft since 2019 and looking forward to sharing some ideas with you. All right, Vivian, your turn.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our data storage series, one of two. Next week, we have another one. So I'm Vivian Paiva. I'm a data enthusiastic, deeply passionate about databases. So I teach more the data-related trainings. I'm like Elias, a Microsoft technical trainer. We are dedicated to empower our customers to liberate the full potential of our technologies. I'm happy to join Elias and Sarah here and be with you to explore this fascinating world of data storage solution. I wish you a really insightful and enriching experience. Stay tuned. Back to you, Elias.
All right, well, thanks, Vivian. Sarah, would you like to say a couple words as well?
Hey everyone, yeah, my name is Sarah Kong. I'm not a data storage expert, so that's why I got these two to do it. So I'm more your infrastructure security type of person. But you have been asking about relational versus non-relational, hence why we created these events for you. So if you can't make it, or if you didn't make it, hopefully you're watching this recording and enjoying it. So back to you, Elise.
All right, well, thanks, Sarah, and thanks, Vivian. So team, let's dive right in. We have a lot to talk about today. However, before we start the discussion, I want to, if you think about that, right, sometimes we wonder where things fit in the relational, non-relational world, as well as the infrastructure, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by, let me go ahead and change my pen here. And let's take a quick look at where the PaaS and the IaaS service fit and where the non-relational data fits that we're going to be discussing today. Okay, so let's start with this. Supposedly, this is your on-prem. For me, every time I do a whiteboarding, I start with this little square as your on-prem. That's your building, your headquarters. And you were sitting right here, and you talk to your on-prem via, hopefully, a VPN, a virtual private network. With that, you have a connection. Let's call this Azure. And a connection to Azure from your home office, you are going to have either a VPN or also you're going to have an express route, a connection to do that. So you have your gateway, and inside of Azure, you're going to find your virtual network. You have your VNet, you also have your subnets. Your subnets are there. I'll just put two of them. Perhaps you have a database subnet and you have an app subnet. And this app subnet, of course, you're going to have VMs on these locations. What do these VMs have? Well, they have disks, right? I have my OS, I have my storage disk, my data disks. Now, remember the disks themselves, they are PaaS services. So in that case, PaaS services, they reside outside the virtual network. So when you talk about your storage account, for example, where you have your tables, your queues, your files, and your blob storage, you have, let's say, let's pick, for example, Cosmos. You have Cosmos DB sitting out here outside the virtual network. I have a, let's say, a SQL Server. We're talking about Azure SQL. We're going to be discussing that next week. Also resides outside of that. And we have many other PaaS services. But if you think about your disks, Your managed disks, they reside inside of a storage account, but you don't manage that storage account. But the disks are sitting there. And these are the disks that are going to be used by these virtual machines. So we are going to be talking about the managed disks. We're going to also be talking about the storage account. Sarah had a very nice video last week about the storage account. So we're going to briefly discuss that. But a storage account as well, storage account that holds your tables, for example, for non-relational data, your blob storage, non-relational data. And of course, we are going to be talking about your Cosmos, which if you think about the tables, for example, I have my tables for non-relational data. Cosmos has tables as well. The same API that I'll be able to use on my Cosmos, I can use that on my storage account. Let's say, for example, I have some IoT device. Well, suppose I have some towers here, right? I have some resources, and I have some IoT coming in. One thing that I can do is maybe I can put an IoT edge device. I can put like a SQL server somewhere. Maybe I have a container. And this container could be on-prem, or I can have this container run on Azure. And this Linux container, I can put in a little SQL in there. I can bring these IoT devices into it. So these are some of the things we're going to be talking about, right? So if you think about from an IaaS support, my disks, for example, is great support for that. My files, for example, is a great support for my IaaS environment. And then, of course, I have my Cosmos for my database. I also have my tables that I can store a lot of devices, a lot of resources into it. So let's talk about some of these items today. First, from a non-relational data, it is important for us to remember the structured and non-structured data, right? If I say structured data, you think about your tables. Like I get my SQL, I have my relational tables, I see how they work. I have my fact tables, I have my dimension tables. They have some relation to it. I can write a SQL statement, I can get to my data. Non-relational, or in this case, a semi-structured data, would be something like a JSON. I have a schema on read, not a schema on write. So in that case, when I want to be able to write my data, I just write into a JSON, a document, into my storage. When I want to read, I write the schema that I want to read. My structured data, I would be able to use like maybe I can write a SQL statement, write my table, and I can create my data. An unstructured data, on the other hand, is something that you'll be able to organize, like your PDFs, your images, your videos, all of those elements. For our discussion today, we are going to be touching some of these, right? Primarily the semi-structured and unstructured, but we are going to go into structured as well a little bit. All right, so just remember those elements. We as architects, sometimes we have a question, what is the best choice for my type of storage? And we do have in our architecture center, right? In the architecture center, we have a very nice location where you can go in and you can find specific details about choosing the appropriate storage solution. I open this link right here. In fact, I'm going to put this link on your storage account. Excuse me, not on your storage account, on your chat line, so you can use that. Let me just go back in here, and let's take this link. This is in our Learn modules, and I'll put this link in there. This is an interesting place where you can find, for example, selecting a particular candidate for your type of storage. I put the documentation there, but I'm going to show you on the presentation. I like to use my my zooming feature here to be able to show you. But for example, I can start right here on the top, and I can say require a specific capability and format. If I already have a specific type of storage, like SQL database, for example, Cassandra or MongoDB, maybe a good idea to be able to use my Cosmos DB, right? I can also use my MySQL, PostgreSQL. We have a lot of type of database, including Cosmos with APIs that I can use for that. Semi-structured data. Oh, yes. Well, I'm going to use Cosmos DB for that. Relational, past type data. I'm going to use SQL database for that, right? Relational data for IaaS. We talked about IaaS, my virtual machines. What do I want to use for that? Maybe I have an option of using NetApp files, for example, for my files. Very fast, 460,000 IOPS. Azure files. I also see Ultra disks. I see premium disks. There are a lot of disks that I can use. We'll touch some of these disks as well. Archiving, storage. So I'm not going to go to every one of these, but I want to give you a perspective that you can make a decision. And for that, there are a lot of options for us to choose between that semi-structured, unstructured, and relational type of data. All right, so with that, let's go down here and talk about the blob storage, right? So consider the type of storage, your storage account. When I look at my storage account, a couple of things that I'm going to be able to understand in there. In my storage, I have my blobs. Blobs, is completely unstructured data. I have various types of blobs that I can use. We're going to be touching about those. Files, for example, I have my managed disks and I have my queues, my storage. So these are things that I consider in my storage account. Now, my storage account, as like I said, we have a nice video that Sarah put out on that discussion. A couple of things we need to take in consideration when you're building your storage account. First is the location, right? I want to build my storage account. What do I do in my storage account? Well, if I have a specific type of, let's say, for example, I'm going to use, tables for my application, I'm going to look for which region I have deployed on that. And as you know, storage account can be replicated in multiple regions as well, right? From a perspective of high availability. You may have local redundant storage, you have zone redundant, and you have geo redundant. But as in any solution, I like to deploy this on the region that is closer to my apps, close to my services that are going to be serviced by this storage account. Compliance as well. When you're deploying your storage account, what do you need to take in consideration? Well, there is replication between primary and a secondary location. So in this case, we talked about replication. Am I being compliant? If you are GDPR compliant, are you going to replicate this data? If I have a storage account in Canada and I let my team replicate my object in the United States, we need to make sure we're not violating any kind of compliance factors, right? So that's important for us. It's great to use those replication points, but be careful how you do that from a compliance perspective. Also, cost. It is important for me to see what type of storage I want to. If I'm going to use a storage account that is premium, for example, I'm going to pay a little bit more, but I have a little bit less in terms of redundancy, right? From a storage account, if you select a premium, what do you have on a premium storage account? I can replicate LRS, right? Or I can also replicate ZRS from a zone redundant or a local redundant. But if I get a general purpose storage account, now I can replicate anywhere, including GRS, right, which is global redundancy, and there's geo redundancy storage across the zones, across the geographic regions. So that's an important aspect. So if you want to, depends on the type of storage that you're going to do, I may want to look at the cost for that. And of course, don't forget the replication of my storage account, which ones I want to be able to choose. It's important for us to know that if I choose the right storage account, I can have the right kind of data in it. And that will depend what I'm going to be storing on my storage account. So if I look at my storage account types, I did mention the general purpose. General purpose is what we get, bread and butter, right? Everybody gets it. I can get my blobs, I make my data lakes, I have my files, my queues, my tables. It is everything. Great, recommended, great format. But it's not as fast as a premium storage account. If I'm going to be able to use premium blob, I want some high performing applications that I need to really have faster access. I'll be looking at those premium blobs. Files, for example, I want to use NFS. I want to be able to use and map this to my critical machines. Then I'll be looking at the premium blob. I pay a little bit more. I have a little bit less redundancy for my geographic, but I have a lot more power, a lot more resilience on my storage. Premium file shares, that's great for my file shares. I want to be able to just do some file shares. And of course, premium blobs as well. But these are the type of storage accounts that I can create. Now, you do remember how to create those storage accounts and where to choose that from. So I'm going to very quickly open up my portal. And in my portal, I am going to log in. I already have a lot of storage accounts, by the way, but I'm going to just go ahead and select one storage account. And I'm going to say, let's create one. And I'm just going to show you where you choose that from a storage account perspective. So down here, when you go down to the storage account, it says performance, standard. Notice that I have GRS. I can also do LRS, ZRS, local redundant. But if you select a premium storage account, now I do page blob, files, and I can also do redundancy only LRS and ZRS. Just remember that. Okay. If you want to do a data lake, I want to do standard storage account, or I want to do a premium block blob. These two options, you can do a data lake. All right. So I'm going to pause in here. Let's go back to the presentation. Let's talk about the blob. I did mention about the blob storage. And oh, Vivian, go ahead. I see you have your hands up.
Just a following up question. So do I need to do anything else to set up a data lake? So I can choose standard and premium, but do I need to do anything else to enable this data
Excellent,
lake?
excellent question. Excellent question. I'm sure the team will appreciate that question. If you think about that from a data lake perspective, I can choose the type of storage account. Supposedly, I want a data lake. I'm going to use this for my, let's say, my Databricks or my Synapse Analytics. I can select a standard, and then we can go down here or up here, let's say, in the advanced area. And there is a button here that says Enable Hierarchical Namespace. That's all I need to do to make sure that this storage account is now a data lake. Now, this means it's now POSIX compliant, HDFS compliant. And also, the best thing about creating a data lake is that I take the bottom out of this blob storage. But a data lake is based on the blob storage. So I can do this using a standard storage account, or I can also, like I said, I can do a premium storage account and select a block blob, and I can also have a data lake with that format. So this is the only thing I need to do, set up a hierarchical namespace. Great question.
Perfect. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So from a blob storage team, we just mentioned in terms of the blob storage, the availability of my blob storage, right? That will depend, of course, on my storage account. If I decided LRS, hey, my blob storage is LRS. Now, one of the things that I really like about the blob storage is the fact that now you can do object replication. That's right. So this is the best part about the blob storage, because now I can put blobs in my blob storage. And let's say, for example, I have this particular object in here, and I needed to replicate across a region that is not the region pair that usually you can do, like zone replication or geo replication is only on the region pair or within the zones. But the object replication, I can create a storage account in any region, anywhere that I want, and I can replicate those objects very quickly. I love that. Always very low latency. And of course, very cost effective, because a blob storage is what? A blob storage is going to be a true PaaS services. The more you use, the more you're going to be consuming, right? The more you're going to be paying for it. So you can instinctively see how much you're going to be paying for your blobs. You don't have to reserve. You can also reserve. You have reservation for blobs, but you don't have to reserve. You pay for what you consume. And another thing they can see on the blob story is that immutability, right? You do have, if you're working financially, you're working in the government, there are instances where I may have, hey, I have some auditing. Let's freeze these systems, right? We need to do some auditing on that. So no writes capability, no changes. And sometimes there are two types of immutability. We'll talk about this, where I'll let you put some more, but I don't let you change that, right? High availability, low latency, great cost. That's what brings, from a storage perspective, it makes blob storage very, very affordable. Now, in terms of the blob storage, a couple of things we need to see that the premium blob, great for you to be able to put in high IO intensive application. I have my web apps. I want to be able to get my resource. I have some applications, some videos. I want to be able, perfect. Premium, you can do that. Now, premium blob, I can have those tiers, right? In terms of be able to do, let's say I have my standard hot, for example. It's good for medium storage. I have my cool storage. That's great. 30 days, I can leave it there, a little bit cheaper. Also, standard archive, great. I can have 180 days. It stays there. You pay a lot less for storage. Remember, when you move storage from one tier to the other, you're going to be paying to get into that tier. So when I put data into my blob storage, hot storage, I don't have that cost, because inside In Word, there is no cost. But when I take that into a cool tier, I'm going to pay that tier. And when I take from cool into archive, I will pay to take from the tier into the archive. And then when I want to read the archive, I'm going to pay from taking the archive into hot or into a cool tier. Vivian, go ahead. You have a question?
Sure. So just to summarize, if I want to have a long-term retention of data, retrieval time, it's not important. So the best solution, as you said, would be the standard archive. Did I
Yeah,
understand right?
if you have data, let's say you have backup, you have some photos. I have thousands of photos, right? I have images, like seasonal. Think about the retail industry, right? I have my summer seasonal flyers, everything. When am I going to use this again? Well, in 6 months. Put that into the archive. You have terabytes of data that you are going to use. You can put that into the archive. 6 months from now, you can take that, retouch, and then put back into the sales, the marketing, for example, right? Or if you're going to do long-term archive, I always finish. I have my storage. Let's say I have my email archive. I have my business archives that I have to hold on for 10 years, 15 years. All of those standard archive is a great way to do that. Lowest possible way for you to hold on to your data.
All right, thank you.
Well, thank you. So, team, this gives you a perspective in terms of the blob storage and, of course, the retention. I want to be able to maintain that. Now, the blob storage, we talked about the immutable uh, storage. So immutable storage is one of those things that let's say I do have a work in the government, I have an auditing that I need to take place. So I need to tell my team, hey, no changes to these. So I can go to a blob storage and set a policy in there, a time-based retention. Hey, for this period, you can add new content, but you cannot make any changes, right? Or if it is a legal hold, hey, it's frozen. No changes can take place on this until we take that legal hold out of that, right? So you can set policies on your blob storage. Either one of those tiers, you'll be able to do that. Now, in terms of the blob storage, one of the things, if you open up, let's go back into our storage account. I did mention I have a few of them. Let's pick this one. I have my storage account and the container. When you look at the blob storage, you are going to be looking at containers, right? Containers is where you're going to put your blobs. And the blobs are going to be flat objects, a flat file system. In this case, the object in here is what I'm putting in. So I can create a container, and then inside of the container, I will be putting my resources in it, okay? Now, let's say, for example, I put this, let's go this SAP share container that I have. You notice on the left-hand side, it says, hey, I have some access tokens. So there are multiple ways for me to access my resources. Well, blob storage, you access through an HTTP endpoint, a REST API, many ways for me to do that. I can also set policies for accessing these resources. And that's the best part, right? When I set a policy, when I create a shared access policy, a shared access signature, or I grant access to someone, I can put a policy in between that. And I can always change this policy, right? Hey, this policy is for read only and only for this period. So when I create my temporary key, access, I can give to someone with that policy, and I can change the policy without changing the entire shared access signature. I really like that. So I just want to give you a little nugget on that blob storage. Now, team, in terms of another type of storage is the files, right? So we talked about the storage account holds a lot of storage types as well. We talked about the blob storage very briefly. Now, in terms of the files are great for your migration. I am great for my file sharing. So if you already have file share in your environment, I can then use Azure Files. The good thing about that is it uses the SMB. SMB is the protocol, right? Server message block. So in that case, when I have my Windows, I can just simply mount this on my environment, not a problem. Just like I do a regular file share, mount them around. The good things about the file shares, I can do up to 2,000 mounting points. So I can have 2,000 VMs connecting to the same file share, which is great, right? I can also, the premium supports 4.1. I can have an NFS, network file share services 4.1 on my premium file share, which is perfect, right? When you select the premium type of files, I can choose between SMB and I can also choose NFS. And of course, I can access that via my REST APIs. Now, in terms of the file, a couple things that I want to be able to look at it, right? The premium files. I have the transaction optimized. I have hot files, and I also have a cool tier for file. When was the best time or the best options for me to use that? Well, let's say, for example, I want to use the premium file. This is great for my IO intensive workloads. If I'm going to use, let's say, for example, you are going to put in a SQL server, right? You have a 2022 server. You're going to get a virtual machine. There are some of those you're going to put disks. Some of those I can use files, right? I can have great IOPS for that. Maybe I have my SAP applications, SAP, or I have some Oracle, other resources. I can use the premium files for this. High IO, low latency, great throughput. Now, transaction optimized. I'm looking at these, an application like file share, file storage, on my backend storage. You already have your file shares going on today for your users, your applications. Great way to do that. Or maybe I have a hot. Hot means I'm going to use this frequently, right? I want to be able to do my file sync, for example. That's a good way to use that. An example, we're using the hot. And of course, the cool. Cool means, hey, this can stay a little bit, almost like the blob cool storage, right? So now I can get a cost-effective file storage, and then I can use this in various scenarios. Now, one thing I need to let you know, the blob storage, like I said, is truly a PaaS service. What does that mean? That means that you are going to pay for what you consume. Files are not like that. Files, you're going to pay by the quota. So supposedly you get a 2 terabyte file share. What happens? You're going to pay for the 2 terabytes with or without data. Now, if you take a snapshot, I can take a snapshot of this file share. Supposedly I have 10 gigabytes that I'm using on this file share. Now I have a 2 terabytes plus my snapshot, I have 10 gig. I pay for that 10 gig of the snapshot. If I have 10 of those, 10 times 10, right? So just think about that for a moment. When you are going to work with file shares, think about the cloud, right? What do I need now, maybe next week, next month? But don't think like 6, 8 months, a year down the road. Oh yeah, by the end of the year, I need 5 terabytes. Let me get a file share that's 5 terabytes. Don't do that. Get what you need. As you need, you can continue to increase because truly it is elastic, right? I can increase the size of my files as I need without affecting my application, my resources. So just think about that for a moment. It's a great way for you to get engaged with the files. Now, in terms of some of the considerations in terms of files, right? I do have blob storage, which is great, but I don't mount a blob storage to my virtual machines. But it does support some great things from a protocol perspective, right? I can do large scale analytical data. I can put my objects in there. I can connect it through an HTTP endpoint, a REST API. It does support NFS. So if I choose to make this a data lake, for example, I can use NFS. I can now use FSTP, and I can move data into it. REST APIs, Data Lake Gen 2 support, great for that, right? But I don't mount those on a virtual machine. I access from a remote resource. Now the Azure files, oh, these are great. I have my ERP, I have my database, I have my resources. I want to mount them. Great mounting point up to, like I said, 2,000 mounting points, SMB, NFS, REST. It is great for that. Now look at the number of IOPS. Your blob storage, you can get 20,000 IOPS. Now your files, I can get 100,000 IOPS, right? So in some instances, we may think, I'm going to put this into a blob storage, but it makes more sense from an application perspective to put into a file share, right? I would do that on a heartbeat. And the good thing is, file shares, I can use what we call the private endpoints. I can do the private endpoint on the blobs as well, but I can do private endpoints with my file share, which means I could very well be a service provider and provide disk services or file services to my customers through private link and private endpoint. Just think about that. All right, NetApps. NetApps is great, right? We also provide NetApps, huge IOPS. NetApps, if you're already using your SAP HANA, you have your Oracle, you have a large database implementations, you are familiar with NetApps on-prem, you can leverage that NetApps in Azure. Get your volumes, carve out any way you want, and you have what? 460,000 IOPS. A lot of customers like to use NetApps for that. Here we're talking about 4.5 gigabits throughput and 10 gigabit throughputs for volume. but it is a bit higher than that now. It has been updated, right? This is the older value. I think we have gone to 100, if I'm not mistaken. All right, so with that, let's talk about the disks. So we did mention about the files, the blobs, the queues, excuse me, not the queues, but the storage account. Now about the disks. The disks are another one that we mentioned. It is a PaaS service, but in reality, it is dedicated to IaaS, right? You only mount disks to your virtual machines. So in that case, disks are like files. When I select a disk, I need to choose the size of my disk. But the beauty of that is the type of disks that I can select, right? I want to be able to really connect through it. I have my connection. I want to be able to mount these disks to my virtual machine, access them privately. I can do that. And of course, some of the considerations. It's going to always be IOPS. How much input output can I handle on this? Now remember, the disks are managed disks. That means there is a storage account behind it, but you don't manage the storage account. You don't need to worry about that. All you need to worry about is my disks and my disk snapshots, right? You have a very large database implementation, SAP HANA, Oracle. I want to consider Ultra disks. Why is the beauty of Ultra disks? Because I can go to 64 terabytes on this. Now imagine a situation where I need to have, let's say 10 terabyte disks. That's 50 terabytes, right? And the number of IOPS that you're going to get those. Usually we get an SSD, a premium disk, and we're going to mount. And we think, oh, there's going to be quite a bit of money to mount these 10 terabyte disks in here and then have a connection between them. Some customers have figured out that it's easier to get an Ultra disk, put in basically 5 volumes on that one, and then be able to use those separate volumes. You have tremendous amount of IOPS and input on that. So I've been working with SAP customers, and we've been doing this. Instead of putting multiple disks, I can get an Ultra disk. I can have a much, much better performance on that. A premium SSD V2. This is the newest version that we have. Great IOPS on that. Premium SSD, that's we already use this one regularly. The standard SSD, and then of course the HDD. Of course, there is speed considerations amongst all of these disks as well, right? So if I'm talking about the Ultra disk, which I like, 2000 megabits per second, 160,000 IOPS. Now, imagine this. If you were considering before a premium SSD is only 20,000 IOPS. Now, if I have 5 of those, I still get, well, 5 times 2, 100,000 IOPS. I can get a single Ultra disk, and I can get almost 3 times the amount of that IOPS on that single disk, right? Something to consider when you do that. Now, remember the disks, like I said, files, because they are in this case, kind of infrastructure, which means you pay for what you reserved. If you get an Ultra disk that is 64 terabytes, you will be paying for 64 terabytes with or without data. If you get a disk that is 8 terabytes, you'll be paying for 8 terabytes with or without data. Now, the disk snapshot is like the files. The snapshot of the disk is going to be the amount of, no, the disk is going to be exactly the same, right? I have the data. No, I have the disks. So the files, the amount of files, the disk, you are going to get some of the data that's in it. But think about the size of the disk. If I take my snapshot and I have to recreate the disk, I need to create a disk the same size, right? But working with a lot of customers in large applications like SAP, what we see customers do is primarily on my production systems, on my primary location, I have a larger system connecting. On the secondary location, I have smaller systems, right? Just something to consider. But think about the speeds, 20,000 IOPS. I have only 6,000 IOPS on a standard SSD, and I have 2,000 IOPS on an HDD. Right? Depends on the type of application. You are going to be looking at the highest possible IOPS. IO intensive, I want to get premium SSD, or I want to get Ultra disks. Getting very popular. Again, not available in all the regions yet. Most of the regions already have them, but they are coming very quickly. All right. With that, team, is just about 7:35. I have one consideration in terms of the storage I want to share with you before I go into a couple more slides. First, the consideration of security, right? We did mention that from a storage perspective, from disk files, from the resources that we have, there are a lot of ways for us to protect that. And for my storage account, where most of these resources that we spoke about are, one of the things I can consider is, well, firewall. We did mention that my storage If you remember my design, I mentioned this is my data center, and then in Azure, I have my VNet, right? And my PaaS services are outside the VNet. So one of the ways that I can protect that is, remember, I have my disks, I have my files, I can use firewall for that. But at the same time, if you think about one of the things from a VNet perspective, we do have service endpoints that allows you to stay private, to connect to your PaaS services, right? I can use private endpoint for that. And don't forget the storage accounts themselves. We have what? We have AD connection that allows me to protect this from Azure Active Directory authentication and authorization from that perspective. We have shared access signature for your storage account with primary, secondary key. And not to forget that all the storage in Azure is always encrypted, AES-256, right? It's always by default. We're using Microsoft key. You can also use your own key for that encryption. So remember your firewall policies to protect your resources, your customer managed keys. So you can use Microsoft key, bring your own, put in the vault. You can use that to manage your storage account. And don't forget the service endpoint, private endpoint, great ways for you to stay private and ensure that, hey, only these resources and these components can talk to one another, right? Those are things you need to consider on your storage account. Now, if I open up my portal here, and if I go back to my storage account, you notice up here, I have my IAM. This is what I come in to set the appropriate level of access, right? If I say I want to add a role assignment, I can grant someone a role of an app contributor, or in this case, an operator. Maybe I want to do a blob or file administrator, contributor. You can decide what you want to allow people to do. Be only a backup, or be only managing the blobs, but not look at the content. So I can there are multiple ways, very granular ways to manage the storage account from an AD perspective. We talked about the connectivity. I have my access keys, primary and secondary access keys. From a networking perspective, right, I have my keys right there. From a networking perspective, that's what I can set my firewalls. I can enable all the resources or only specific networks, or I can disable this, be completely private using private endpoints. So if I disable this access, means it is isolated, and now I can use private endpoint and specify borrow an IP address from a virtual network, and only those resources can talk to that, right? I can specify how it's going to work on it. Custom domains, I can also work on that on my storage. But yes, private endpoint, firewall connectivity, and my shared access signature. And these are great ways to be able to protect. Object replication, I did mention that. Be careful with the object replication. You can only do this on your storage account that is non-data lake, right? And in that case, I can create a secondary storage account and replicate. Be careful with that compliance factor. If you can take the blobs out of that region, great. But if you want to be GDPR compliant, make sure you address this when you create your storage accounts. All right, team. So with that, grant limit access to your storage account, right? Limited only to those individuals that are needed. Don't make all of your storage accounts private. Enable firewall rules. I did mention that in terms of IP addresses. Private endpoints, and of course, private links is a great way to do that. Virtual network service endpoints, great way to do that. I love this service endpoint because, hey, when I do that, then that virtual network can talk to that storage account. Any of those, I can specify how many of those subnets, how many of those networks can talk to this storage account. I love that. And of course, custom manage encryption keys. You want to manage your own? Great. I can go to the vault, create my key, put it there, point the vault to my storage account. We're going to use that key for your storage. With that, team, I have one stepping away from our non-relational data. I'm going to go into Vivian's territory, and briefly talk about the SQL Edge, right? What is the SQL Edge? Well, it's SQL Server, it's relational data, great, but it has one specific purpose. It's for an IoT device. So now I have my IoT device. I want to have a very quick container with a SQL database. Maybe I have some machine learning that I want to be able to grab from it and use it. That's what we're going to do. That set up this container with a SQL, and now I can bring it in my IoT devices. Right, it's based on ARM 64, very fast, very easy, but it's basically a Linux a Linux application that I can put in there, and now I can have SQL-like, right, environment where I can store my data, run my processes. It's great for that. So you have streaming content coming into the SQL, and now you can have your business logic, and of course, your machine learning accessing that, right? So you can have your backend systems connecting to it. But think about this IoT edge, IoT devices. That's what I'm going to use this the SQL edge. In fact, I have a link to the documentation here. What is the SQL edge? A lot of customers ask that, and from a knowledge perspective, there are a lot of things you can learn from that. Okay, in terms of running SQL on Linux, for example, Linux containers. All right. So I have some nice videos in there, and the deployment, how you go about deploying this. You have your manufacturing floor, you have your solar panels, you have your windmills, you have a lot of IoT devices. You want to try that. You can use your IoT hubs, and you can use your SQL Edge. All right. Vivian, anything you want to say about the SQL Edge before I jump out? Because, like I said, it's your territory.
Oh, good. Oh, good. We can think about local data storage for processing these IoT data, telemetry, and things like that. Yes.
Excellent. All right, team. With that, let's talk about one more thing. We talked about in terms of the data, right? I want to be able to look at semi-structured data. In this case, think about a key value pair. I have a table storage, and in this table storage, we always consider the table storage in the Azure storage account, right? Storage account, there's already a table in there, and that's great. Very fast, but not as fast as Cosmos DB, right? Cosmos DB is a polyglot, a globally distributed database, and that's great because it is, like I said, very fast. And it has, I say polyglot because I can create an account and I can choose the appropriate API that I want to put in. Maybe I want to put Cassandra, MongoDB, I want to put Grammarly for graphic. But the primary one, if I'm starting fresh, right? If I don't have Cosmos, I don't have Cassandra, I don't have MongoDB, I don't have Grammarly, I want a very fast storage where I can put in my tables. I have two choices in there. I can get my storage account and put tables in there, or I can get a Cosmos with that table API. They share basically the same API, which is great, right? Flexible, semi-structured table storage, both of them can do that. However, now I have a globally distributed multi-read write capability in my Cosmos DB. I also have very fast operation. Again, let me say that. Why is it very fast? Think about this. Your tables, I can do maybe 20,000 operations per second. On Cosmos, I can do 20 million operation. That's a lot more. That's why customers that were using table before is like, wait a second, I can do 1,000 times more than that in my Cosmos DB. It's very popular for that. So if you're considering table for your storage, consider looking at Cosmos DB. It became very popular lately. Last year we had a lot of emphasis on that. So a lot of customers are focusing on using Cosmos DB for that purpose. All right. With that, I want to pause in here, team. I want to see if Vivian or Sarah or anyone in the team has any additional questions. But this is what we had for today, 45 minutes full of information. Any questions for me, team? Vivian, anything we want to add? No? Sarah, anything you want to add to this conversation, Sarah?
No, this was great. Thank you so much.
All right, so I want to say thank you, team. And like I said, this week we are talking about non-relational data. We gave you some great perspective of that. Now, next week, Vivian are going to take the podium. Vivian and Vivian's going to help you with relational data. So thank you, team. I hope everyone has a great day and keep on learning.